What do you want to be known for? For me, I think I'd like to be known as being a good friend, someone who is generous and kind, and someone who spent her life telling other people about Jesus. But in reality, sometimes I can be known for being cranky in the morning, being really particular about what kind of Diet Coke I drink, or even being a little bit bossy to my siblings. We all earn our reputations through our actions and through our attitudes. Perception is reality. The way that people perceive us has a lot of power. If someone thinks something about us, regardless if they actually know us personally, it can really affect the way that someone thinks about us. So in this series, Reputation, we're going to talk about Paul, a guy who earned a big reputation, but ended up flipping it completely around. He was different things to different people throughout his life. He was either a source of fear or a huge source of inspiration. It's likely that he was a polarizing person. People felt strongly about him one way or the other. They either really loved the guy or hated the guy's guts, and it all hinged on whether or not they were a Christian. So we're going to check out the book of Acts, chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. It says, "And Saul, Paul, approved of the killing them. Stephen, a Christian." That's who he killed. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. Paul sounds like a really great dude, right? Or someone who has a big reputation, as my girl Taylor Swift would say. So here is what Paul is known for. He hated Christians, he approved of their persecution, and he actually enjoyed persecuting Christians. So Paul's story actually really starts in Acts chapter 8 and 9. So let's zoom in on that. We're going to read Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 6. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether man or woman, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." He replied, "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." So from this passage of scripture, we can see that Paul's life changes. How? God calls Paul to stop persecuting Christians. This shows us God's personal relationship to his people. God doesn't say, "Why are you persecuting my people?" But he says, "Why are you persecuting me?" God takes this personally. He's hurt that Paul has spent so much time hurting and persecuting him, God himself. So next, God calls Paul to obey. In verse 5, it says, "You will be told what you must do." So God asserts authority in Paul's life in an instant. He's calling Paul to obey him instead of persecuting him, as Paul was very used to doing. And then Paul's new life begins. A few verses later, we're told that Paul got up from the ground and he couldn't see anything. He's suddenly blind. So he has an encounter with God, whom he's been persecuting. He's now blind and has to rely on other people to help him. Everything he once knew and trusted is different in a moment. So what do we learn from this? You earn your reputation by what you do. For Paul, this was how he had hurt God's people. God stepped in and called him to do different things, so he would become a different person with a different reputation. You earn your reputation by what you don't do. If Paul was going to turn his reputation around, which he didn't even know he needed to do, he was going to have to stop doing these awful things that he was doing, things that he actually really enjoyed. So sometimes we earn a reputation on accident because we don't realize that the things we are doing are affecting the other people around us. So for example, maybe you're known at school for giving people in the hallway a cold shoulder. But in reality, you're just really focused on getting to your locker and getting to your next class before the passing period ends. Other people might see you as rude, but really, you don't mean anything by it. Your reputation affects others. The men on this journey with Paul all of a sudden find themselves wrapped up in the same experience. Not as clearly or as directly, but they know that something is happening and they're along for the ride at this point. What would it look like for your friends to be along on this ride with you as you devote yourself to Jesus? You'd be surprised at the positive impact it'll have on the people around you. Whether they know exactly what's different about you or not, it'll have the ability to change everything in their lives as well as yours. Every single one of us has a reputation. It's part of being a human being living in the world. And we're going to continue to explore the power of our reputations as we continue on in this series. As we get ready to wrap up, I want you to think about, what do you want to be known for? And how might your actions be affecting the people around you, intentionally or unintentionally? We'll see you back next week.